Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Iron Coffins Part 17. It was late in September of 1942. I entered the Tirpitz Bridge in Kiel just before midnight. 1 year and 6 months had passed since I had sailed from this pier on U-557 for my first war patrol. Much had changed since then. The long pier where several U-boats were moored was shielded against aerial reconnaissance. As I learned from my white-jacketed steward on board the old steamer where we stayed, the English flew over the fjord regularly every day. Initially, reconnaissance planes came during the day, photographing the fjord and the harbor. At night, bombers penetrated the airspace, first dropping parachute flares, known as Christmas trees, and then the bombs. I was somewhat reassured to hear that our flak forced the individual planes to high altitudes, and that the attacks were more annoying than truly dangerous. However, the increasing activity of the English caused me considerable concern about the safety of U-230. If our boat were to be damaged or even sunk by a stray bomb, our participation in the Battle of the Atlantic would be out of the question for a long time. Our men returned well rested from their leave. 3 days after my arrival, I mustered the crew on the pier. Without exception, the men were eager to set sail. But as would soon become apparent, we were far from taking possession of our new boat. Siegmann, the captain, dampened our eagerness with the news that U-230 would not be completed before the end of October. As a result, we cleared out the cabins of the old steamer and quartered ourselves on an ancient, weather-beaten cruiser. The former Hamburg, with its superstructure stripped down to the upper deck, served as a floating accommodation for crews on instructional duty. It provided additional protection against shrapnel during nightly bombing raids. I focused on my task on preparing our men for the front. In early October, I embarked on a journey to the Belgian coast to attend a course on radar equipment. Our new boat was equipped with radar that would allow us to locate the enemy in the dark and fog long before we could spot them with our binoculars. This equipment had been in use on our capital ships for years and had played a crucial role in the sinking of the Hood by the Bismarck. Now, this detection device would usher the submarine war into a new phase. It would enable us to outmaneuver the destroyers guarding the convoys and attack and destroy targets without even seeing them. Impressed by the potential of this new weapon, I returned from the radar school. Back in Kiel, U-230 demanded every minute of my time. I had not only to ensure that the completion deadline was met, but also to oversee the installation of the radar equipment, study numerous technical manuals to keep myself informed of developments, and furthermore, keep the crew physically and mentally fit. On October the 24th, U-230 was commissioned. We had brought the boat from the shipyard to the Tirpitz Bridge, donned our best uniforms, and assembled on the afterdeck. After a brief speech, the commander of the 5th Flotilla gave the order to hoist the flag. It was the flag of the ill-fated U-612. We earnestly believed, mixed with some superstition, that the old flag would prolong the life of our new boat. After the ceremony on board, there was a celebration ashore and a remarkably meager meal that clearly indicated our dwindling food supply in the 4th year of this war. U-230 was taken over by its crew with a sense of gratitude. Eager to participate again in the Battle of the Atlantic, we plunged into a long and arduous series of exercises, tests, deep dive trials, and attack maneuvers. During these short voyages, we activated our radar equipment at every opportunity, locating buoys and ships as they crept over the horizon. However, the device did not meet our expectations. Since the dipole antenna was rigidly attached to the front of the tower casing, we could only locate targets that were directly ahead. To cover the entire horizon, we were forced to describe a complete circle with the boat, a process that was not only time-consuming, but also impossible to execute in the Atlantic and especially when in contact with the enemy. It was early November when U-230 set sail for the shooting grounds in the Baltic Sea. Not far from the spot where we had lost U-612, we fired dozens of torpedoes, tested our fire control system, and refreshed our combat routines. Crash dives and mock attacks alternated with trim tests and gunnery exercises. The most crucial test of our shortened training period culminated in a 1-week mock convoy battle in the Baltic Sea. A German convoy of about 20 cargo ships, accompanied by several destroyers and torpedo boats as escorts, sailed somewhere in the eastern Baltic. It was the task of some frontline-ready U-boats to locate, chase, and destroy this convoy. A Luftwaffe unit conducted wartime military air defense to make it more difficult for the boats to attack. On a bitterly cold December day, U-230, which had met with other boats in the port of Pillau, crawled through the ice floats at the harbor entrance and then headed north. A Siberian wind drove frozen spray against the superstructure, soon covering it with a thick layer of ice. 16 hours later, we spotted the convoy in the darkness of a winter night and immediately launched our attacks. Our assaults were repeated day and night. The commander employed every conceivable tactic, and we fired our torpedoes from all angles and decimated the convoy several times. Persistent air attacks by our own bombers taught our men on the bridge a profound respect for the death from the air. The wargame ended 5 days before Christmas, and the boat and crew had proven themselves most excellent, and we were declared frontline ready without reservation. Soon after, we navigated U-230 around the Kiel lightship, then through the narrow channel of the fjord, which had been broken through the thick ice by an icebreaker. Rusty and covered in ice, the boat finally returned alongside the Tirpitz pier. But the long delays were still not over. One day before Christmas, with the thermometer dropping to 17 degrees below zero, I moved our boat to the shipyard. It was to be equipped with an extension of the tower and a second deck for an additional anti-aircraft gun. These modifications were completed on New Year's Eve, and our departure for the combat patrol was set for January the 6th. However, on January the 8th we discovered a serious leak in the diesel compartment, forcing us to postpone our departure to the following Monday. These last 2 weeks of anxious waiting were a nerve-wracking experience for all of us. The weather was cold and stormy, which was excellent for convoy battles in the Atlantic, but uncomfortable for us, who were confined to the shabby cabins of the old steamship at the pier. The food was poor even on Christmas Eve, and the day would have passed entirely unnoticed had we not received some letters and packages from home. We listened eagerly to the radio broadcasts and the latest Wehrmacht reports. However, even the latest news was not inclined to lift our festive mood. Rommel's Afrika Korps had suffered a severe defeat at El Alamein and had been forced to retreat to winter quarters somewhere in the desert. The Russian winter had proven to be an insurmountable opponent. But the difficulties faced by our armies accustomed to conquest were easier to bear than the reports of our U-boat successes, in which we couldn't participate. According to a year-end report from the High Command of the Navy, our unrestricted submarine warfare alone had cost the Allies more than 6 million tons of shipping in 1942. From June to October, over 500,000 tons were sent to the bottom each month. In November, 117 ships with over 600,000 tons had been sunk. The blockade of England seemed to be achieving its goal, and the spectre of hunger and a lost war marched rapidly through the United Kingdom. The remarkable success of the U-boats had been achieved despite increasing Allied air surveillance in the critical defense area between Scotland and Greenland and over the Bay of Biscay. The enemy had developed a new radar device that enabled its bombers to detect a surfaced boat in heavy seas and at a great distance. To evade this aerial threat, our boats were equipped with a device called Metox, which intercepted and indicated enemy radar beams. Warned of an imminent attack, the boat had time to dive with an alarm and quickly go to greater depths before the aircraft could approach and release its bombs. Allied air raids had significantly intensified both at sea and on land. Hamburg, Düsseldorf and other cities were repeatedly subjected to heavy attacks. We ourselves experienced only a minor attack in Kiel. When the leak was discovered on January the 8th, Siegmann took the opportunity to visit Hamburg once more to see his wife and child before our departure. I myself decided to use this final delay to make a brief detour to Berlin. I was back with Marianne on Saturday evening when bombers appeared over Berlin as we were having breakfast at Café Wien on Kurfürstendamm. Amid the wailing of the air raid sirens, I paid for an untouched breakfast and rushed into the nearby subway station with Marianne by my side. We worked our way through the pushing and shoving crowd deeper into the tunnel. The distant explosions shook the foundations deep beneath the earth. Women sat on suitcases or boxes containing their few belongings. Others stood in groups, guarding sacks and bags. Old men and women stood against the walls or sat on small folding chairs. Children played carefree, seemingly oblivious to the tremors, the thunder of bomb impacts, and the harsh barking of anti-aircraft guns. The attack lasted a little over an hour. When we finally emerged onto the street, it was littered with cement, glass, bricks, and debris. The air reeked of cordite and smoldering fires. Black, dirty clouds hung in the sky, rising above the tormented city, and in the distance I heard the wailing of fire department bells and the long, mournful honking of police cars. My train to Kiel was scheduled to leave Stettiner Bahnhof at 5:30 p.m, but the bombers had destroyed the tracks in a northern suburb. So I stood hopelessly amidst the rubble of the shattered facade and the broken glass that had fallen from the station roof. It would be impossible for U-230 to sail on time. I inquired about the possibility of catching a train to Hamburg to get to Kiel from there. I was told that a train would depart at 8 p.m. with a 6-hour delay. The farewell was not a heart-wrenching affair, because Marianne was a brave girl. We promised each other to be cautious and preserve our love, and as the train slowly pulled out of the darkened station, I heard the wailing of air raid sirens again. At 8:30 p.m. the following evening, I finally reached Kiel. 40 minutes later, I knocked on the commander's door, and he had already heard about the air raid on Berlin, and before I could offer my prepared apology, he said with a tone of relief, "You could have been killed in Berlin, XO. It would have been better for you to have stayed here." I was relieved. It was clear to me that any further delay on our departure was not within my control, and I asked, "When are we setting sail, Herr Oberleutnant?" The captain answered, "Some minor changes and repairs have become necessary, but in 1 at most 2 days the boat should be ready. I plan to depart on Wednesday after lunch, and I expect the boat and crew to be ready for action by then." Just as planned, we left Kiel at 2 p.m. on February the 4th, 1943. The farewell ceremony had been brief, and the traditional last meal was only a shadow of the feasts served on such occasions in previous years. A furious snowstorm had prevented the Navy band from playing at our farewell on the pier. For our men, this meant little. Nothing was more important than finally setting out again. U-230 battled stubbornly against the winter storm. Strong gusts of wind drove snow and hail into our faces. Short, sharp waves pounded against the tower structures, and the spray froze in flight. We set course to the north, and visibility was 0. Short episode today because I'll be traveling a lot for work these days, and I'll actually be at Lake Constance this week, so I'm going to be sharing some pictures of Herbert's place of youth in the community section of my channel. A few interesting things to note about this episode: you can feel the tide turning for the U-boat force with the advent of airborne radar. And the early countermeasures like the METOX were crude and not very durable, and we will learn about how it worked in the next episode. Also, U-230 has an interesting tower emblem, which you might already know. It's the sawfish, which was made popular by U-96 in Das Boot. They both share the same emblem. The sawfish actually is still in use today among the so-called combat swimmers of the German Navy, which are the German naval commandos. So, thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers!